Hello chess friends and welcome to Zadov's chess channel and welcome to the Opera Euro Rapid Chess Tournament in 2021. We're now in the super final. We have of course the clash of the titans, Vasily So versus Magnus Carlsen, and my predictions were, as I mentioned in the beginning, that it could be really Vasily So's tournament. He outplayed Magnus Carlsen in the first round with the white pieces, and I think Vasily So played an outstanding quarterfinal stage and also a great semi-final stage. Magnus Carlsen, on the other hand, had some troubles in the quarterfinals against Dubov and also against Maxim Vachill-Lagrave in the semifinals, but still, in my opinion, they were really deserved wins because it seemed to me that basically Magnus Carlsen allowed his opponents to get back into the game. So now we have really, in my opinion, the best finals that we could have for Vasily So versus Magnus Carlsen. I have my Lichess hoodie on. We can start to analyze some games. In the first game, Magnus Carlsen and Vasily So played a draw. So Magnus Carlsen played with the white pieces the first game. Now we're in the game 2. This game 2 is really wild. An Italian game has been played, and the so-called knight attack, I think it's a very popular line. You can also check it out sometimes, try it out maybe, and this is really a nice tactical battle between the two top grandmasters. Let's check out now what happened. Here Vasily So opened with the move e4. Magnus responds with the move e5. Knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, the Italian game. And there are now several options. We can go into the gioco piano. Here Magnus Carlsen goes in this so-called two knights defense, and again you can play maybe a calm game. I've seen recently Magnus plays the normal moves d3, but Vasily So is really a sharp player. He plays the move knight to g5, the attack of course against the weak f7 square. Now basically what black can do is play sort of a gambit line, and I think black has good counter-attack possibilities. Black has great opportunities to attack because although maybe white can grab a pawn now in this line, black has a really nice piece activity here. d5, we have e takes d5, still main theory, knight to a5, and we have now the so-called Polerio defense. After knight to a5, the bishop has to move somewhere. We have bishop to b5, c6, d takes c6, b takes c6, and okay, black has lost a pawn, but it comes with a great activity here. Bishop to e2, bishop to d3 are possibilities. This pawn is, I think, very annoying. This pawn can be advanced to the e4 square, then bishop to d6 will happen. Black will build a really nice setup on dark squares. Bishop to d6, queen to c7. So now one of the most popular lines to play as white is the move bishop to d3. This line I think has been most often played by the top grandmaster level 11 Aronian, and here are the problems and the good parts of this line. First of all, we're blocking out temporarily this potential breakthrough on e4, so it is a prophylactic idea by white. What the bad part of course is of this line is that you have blocked out your bishop's activity, your dark square bishop. You would love to of course to play something like d3, then to have at least this diagonal. b3 would be very risky because then you have to play your knight again on c3. Again, this bishop would be blocked out. So it's a really passive setup, but it comes with the idea to stay somehow very active in the center and not allowing here the pawn breakthrough e4. Knight to d5, attacking the knight. Knight to f3, still main theory. As I said, you can see really many games by Levon Aronian in the database, and Levon is the master, I think, of this particular line. So bishop to d6, protecting the pawn, castling. So still we're in the sharpest line now of the Italian. Now Vasily So plays rook to e1, attacks the pawn, and here really one of the most brutal lines is the move f5, and it's again very often played. The idea is clear, we want to play e4, and e4 is very dangerous. So here I think you have to take knight takes e5, and now comes queen to f6, and black has lost 2 pawns. But the problem is now you see all of the pieces of blacks are playing. Bishop is very active, knight is centralized. This knight, although is temporarily on the edge of the board, still I think this knight could come in the game very easily. And here also after potential f4, this bishop gets very active. So it's a gambit line of course for black, but still I think it comes with a great compensation of piece activity. So that's why it is playable, and the evaluation is still about equal for both sides. But Magnus Carlsen has, I think, a great attacking setup here. So knight to f3, here comes g5, and you could try several ideas. the engine suggests actually here with the move g3, and g3 is preventing at least some kind of a breakthrough here, because after g4 that would be, I think, a positional mistake. White would have the opportunity to jump with the knight on h4, and the problem is now this knight it's a little bit trapped, because here c4 was played by Wesley. So the problem is now after potential g4, you see the knight doesn't have any squares. The rook has taken out, the king has taken out the natural squares for the knight. Knight to h4 is not a possibility. So the move g3 would be preparation to have at least some kind of a escape route here for the knight, but still it leads now into complicated games. Here f4, you see how black gets now very nice activity, although down 2 pawns. f4, knight to c3 could be maybe the line, and now after f takes g3, you see again the knight on f3 is hanging, but now it comes with great ideas. Queen to f3, queen to f3, and now after rook to f3, bishop to e4, you see, and you would be forced even to play rook to f7 here, and it's really a wild line. Knight to d5 here, it's really sharp line of the Italian. Rook to b8, you can here also lose the rook. So black has to be also careful here. Maybe after this line, probably the best way is first maybe to take out the knight on c3. After d takes c3, maybe again black could play queen to f3. Queen to f3, rook to f3, but again bishop to g5, you see you lose this pawn, and then after bishop to e4 and something like b4 to kick away the knight, we can also take out this pawn. And I think white would have a great compensation for this piece. So white would have many pawns in the continuation of the game, so that's why here g3 is maybe, as I said, in this particular line the best way to proceed here. Here Wesley so plays even a sharper line. It's a really wild line. It's the move c4, and it gives maybe when it comes to computer evaluations, black is better evaluation, but here after move c4 again the game gets very complicated. Knight to f4 played by Magnus, cementing this knight on a very active square. Bishop to f1, and now comes the move g4, and it's really wild. Again, I'm pointing out here it's a game in the database Aronian Vidit. I've analyzed this game. It was an incredible game by Levan Aronian with great tactics. From 2019, Aronian won that game. Here g4, you see the knight is out of game, and now comes d4. This was also the played line by Levan Aronian. G takes f3, queen to f3, and okay, let's stop and evaluate now a little bit the position. Black is now one piece for 3 pawns. The problem is now it seems so that you could take out this pawn here, queen to d4. If that was a possibility, then I think black would have a great continuation, but actually it's not possible. Rook to d1 will happen. You have to retreat with the queen. Then rook to d6 is one of maybe good lines. There are even better lines, but here let's see really a natural line, rook to d6, and now bishop to f4. Again, it comes with the bishop, with an attack by the bishop on the queen. Knight to c3 will simply play on fast development, and I think here black's king is a little bit naked. This bishops will find ways into the game and attack black's king. So again, taking out the pawn here on d4 is not a possibility. You have to be patient here. Magnus played the move knight to e6, and now queen to c3. Again, if you try here queen to d4, again it comes with the, you see the knight is hanging, so you cannot take out. You have to play first here knight to b7, and now c5, attacking the bishop. Here bishop to c7, and now comes b4. If you try now queen to d4, this wasn't played in the game, but now queen to d4, here are the problems. Knight to d4, bishop to c4, you have maybe here the opportunity to play king to g7, or getting your bishop back and lose some material. But if you try here king to g7, then it's simply a lost game here. After the move bishop to b2, you could maybe cover this, but here knight to d2, knight to b3 will happen. Rook to d8, rook to e7 is a possibility here to attack on the 7th rank. So really great attacking possibilities for white. So after the move b4, as I said, you have to be careful. Here Magnus tries to split the pawn chain. You cannot take the pawn. That's the main issue here, I think, of blacks. Here Magnus tries to split the pawn chain with the move a5. If you play b takes a5, then you're inviting one of these pieces into the game of blacks, rook to a5 or bishop to a5, knight to a5. So black would have a flexibility with which piece to take. I think you shouldn't invite your opponent's game pieces into the game. Here after potential a3, it's also not good. After a takes b4, you couldn't actually recapture here with the pawn. Then the game gets simplified. Rook takes a1, queen to a1, and I think then this idea queen to d4 would work. So here in the game, after the move a5, Vasily so passed through with the move b5. We have queen to d4 by Magnus Carlsen, and it's now the first really blunder by Magnus Carlsen, because that wasn't a good idea. Here probably the best way is simply to take c takes b5, bishop to b5, and now maybe queen to d4 would be still risky after bishop to c4. That's the main tactic that I think black has to take care of always. This bishop to c4 idea is very dangerous. You see it comes with a direct threat. Bishop takes e6 followed with queen takes d4, and here after the move as we said, b5, Magnus Carlsen took queen to d4, and now Vasily so makes actually a mistake. The best continuation is here to play bishop to c4, and now if queen takes c3 happens, we would then have knight to c3, and I'm not seeing good ways how to protect this pawn. After knight to c5, bishop to a3 is also very dangerous. Rook to f7 could be maybe a possibility, but still worth threatening here. Bishop takes c5 followed with bishop to e6, rook takes e6, and as I said, it's really wild game. Maybe after move bishop to b6, we would then have the opportunity to play rook to b1, b takes c6, and somehow get rid of this bishop, attack the key defender of the c5. You see there are many pins all over the board, so it could be really a problem here for black. So that's why here after move knight to as we said, queen to d4, Vasily makes a mistake. He played queen takes d4, Magnus takes knight to d4, and now this move bishop to c4 is not so dangerous because many pieces are off the board. Here Magnus decides to give simply material back after bishop takes e6, knight to e6, rook to e6, but now Magnus has a great move, knight to c5, and here comes the part where actually it was, I think, really the critical moment of the game. Here Vasily so didn't react correctly. He should have played simply rook to c6, and this leads now into really complicated line. Here Magnus has the opportunity to play bishop to e5, rook to c5. Actually Vasily so would be forced in this line to give up the rook for the exchange, but now after bishop to f4, I think Vasily so could regroup with a4. He still has two extra pawns and the knight for rook. This could be playable, but here in the game he made a huge blunder. He played the move rook to e2, and now there is the problem. The rook is protecting again the e5 square, and Magnus simply goes here, simply rook from f to e8. He wants now to play the move here bishop to e5. If Vasily so would have retreated here to e1, then again it gets wild with after move knight to d3. Here you see the bishop is hanging. You have to move first the rook, then we take out the bishop, and again we're playing simply bishop to e5, and this bishop would be very dangerous. So that's the issue here, the lack of development here by white. So that's why after move rook to e2, Magnus goes simply rook from f to e8. He's challenging the rook, and he has now the opportunity to finally play the move bishop to e5. So after the move rook to e8, there's only one way to defend this position, and Vasily so played it, but still it's a bad position. He made that mistake, as we said. One mistake costed him really a comfortable game. Here after move rook to e8, Vasily so proceeds with knight to c3. The serious threat was, as we said, bishop to e5. He has to somehow get rid of this rook on the e file. Here Magnus proceeds simply with c takes b5. Again, if you take knight takes b5, then this idea will come bishop to e5. It's very dangerous. So here Vasily so plays bishop to e3. He regroups somehow. Magnus counterattacks with bishop to e5. Finally this bishop gets into the game. Bishop to c5, bishop to c3, rook to e8. After trades of pieces, now Magnus has here a 2 versus 1 pawn majority. He has to now push the pawns. He has to now to create a pass pawn. The problem of white here is in this particular scenario, and we know how Magnus plays these endgames, is that the king is simply too far away from the action. The king is too far away. This pawns will advance here after move king to f1, rook to e5. You see the rook is also cutting off the e file, very important file for the king to get activated. Here bishop to e3, Magnus simply push a4, we have rook to c1, we have a3. Here you see Magnus has a very nice grip on dark squares. The only way the main idea here is finally to get b3, then a2 and a1. That's the main tactical goal, how to advance the pawns. Here g3, we have now this idea, rook to b5, here rook to c2. Vasily So is defending, is trying to defend this position like a line, but still this idea works. b3, if you take out the bishop, of course it's game over. We can play b2 here, and you cannot get back, and it's a losing game here for white. So after move b3 here, a takes b3, and now Magnus takes, rook takes b3. Here we have king to g2, we have king to f7, bishop to d2, bishop to e5. Magnus stays now with the pieces on the board, bishop to f4, and now bishop to f4. A great decision again by Magnus Carlsen, because after g takes f4, he has now to play the opportunity to play the move rook to b7, and this is the so-called Tarrasch rule. The Tarrasch rule says you should bring your rooks behind your pawns when you have advanced pawns, and you should also bring your rook behind your enemy's pawns. But here Magnus Carlsen simply applied the Tarrasch rule, and now the rook is always deflected to the defense of this pawn of the potential promotion on the a file, and now the king can march on, can play much freely. Then this rook would always cut off some files, some ranks against the king. The white king would be very inactive, and also the rook would be very passive. So here after move rook to a2, here Magnus, as we said, he's cutting off ranks. We have king to h4. Now you see Magnus Carlsen king can also bring a white king into sort of a Zugzwang position. King to g7, he's waiting now a move by Vasily So. We have h4, king to e2, and now you see Magnus go simply towards the pawns. Here he has now the opportunity to take out some pawns, and after move king to g2 in this position, Vasily So resigned, because you cannot, of course, only take this pawn with the king or with the rook. You need both pieces in order to take out this pawn, but then white's king will be deflected too much to the queen side, and Magnus will simply grab all of these pawns and will have two pass pawns. And as I said, after this move, king to g2 in this position, Vasily So resigned. Incredible game, a really sharp game. Magnus showed here as thing outstanding understanding of dynamic, and then afterwards also a great understanding of endgames. Vasily So had his opportunities, and you see how dangerous this line can be. After the move queen takes d4, which was, I think, Magnus Carlsen's inaccuracy, then Vasily So plays queen to d4, takes out. He should have proceeded, as we said, bishop to c4 first, then to take out the queen maybe afterwards. It's really wild how one inaccuracy can cost you the game. Still, Vasily So has his chances. Believe me, he's a great player. He will find ways to get back into this game. So far, Magnus Carlsen now has a comfortable lead. He needs only maybe one more win, and he's the winner of the first day of this match game. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. The interesting lines of the Italian game of the night attack. If you want to see more games from this tournament, check out my coverage so far. Here is the link. And if you want to see maybe some other material, check out my best chess games of all time series with some great games from the past. And you can also check out my commented chess games played by computers, in which I show really great attacks by the top engines, Lila C0, Alpha 0, Stockfish, and NUE, and similar stuff. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.